Thousands of years ago, on the fertile soil of the Nile River, a civilization was born under the stars. Ancient Egypt was a civilization full of mystery that etched its name in golden letters on the pages of history. In this ancient land full of the splendor of the pharaohs, the mystery of the gods and the secrets of daily life, we open the magical curtain of time. Are you ready to get lost in the shadow of the pyramids, the magic of religious rituals, and the flow of the Nile? Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River. The warm waters of the river flow beneath your feet as the warmth of the sun caresses your skin. When you look around, you see a fertile valley full of lush green fields and date palms. This is the magical world of the Nile River. The heart and soul of ancient Egyptian civilization, this river is not only a source of water, but also of life. It is impossible to imagine ancient Egypt without the Nile River. This river is one of the most important elements that contributed to the establishment, development, and prosperity of the civilization.
Nilneri, Benham Tanrilar Terrafin and Armagan Edolmus Bir Nemedir. Bu Nehir Olmadan Hakim, E Kialir, Toprakler Mais Koraklasir V Uigarligim is Yokolurdu.
Pharaoh was right. The Nile River was vital to the people of Egypt. It was used to irrigate farmland, provide drinking water, create trade routes, and offer transportation. When the Nile overflows, the fields are covered in a fertile layer of mud, which allows for abundant crops to be grown. This abundance allowed Egypt to feed its population and build a strong economy. The Nile River was an important trade route connecting different parts of Egypt. Boats were used to transport wheat, papyrus, stones, and other goods. This trade contributed to Egypt's prosperity and its contacts with other civilizations. The Nile River was not only a source of water and a trade route, it was also central to religious beliefs. The Egyptians believed that the Nile was ruled by the god Hapi and treated it with reverence. It is possible to find temples and monuments describing the importance of the Nile River. These monuments show the respect and gratitude the Egyptians had for this river. The Nile River is one of the greatest treasures of ancient Egypt. It is not only a source of water, but also a symbol of life, fertility, and civilization. Open your eyes and feel the magic of the Nile River inside you. This river will forever continue to tell the mysterious and fascinating story of ancient Egypt. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River, in the middle of a landscape bathed in the golden rays of the sun. As you follow the flow of the river, you realize that two distinct regions are separated. In ancient Egypt, these regions were called Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. Lower Egypt is the region where the Nile River flows into the sea. This area has a large and fertile delta and is ideal for agriculture. Lower Egypt is home to most of Egypt's population and is the country's most important commercial center. Crops such as wheat, barley, cotton, and grapes were grown in Lower Egypt. The people in this region lived prosperously on the income from agriculture and trade. Memphis, the capital of Lower Egypt, was one of the most important cities of ancient Egypt and the residence of the pharaohs.
Lower Egypt is the heart and soul of my people. This fertile land offers us abundance and prosperity.
Upper Egypt is the region towards the source of the Nile River. This region has a narrower, rocky terrain and is less favorable for agriculture. Upper Egypt was important for mining and stone masonry. In Upper Egypt, precious metals such as gold, silver, copper, and stone were mined. People in this region made a living from the income they earned from mining and stone masonry. The city of Thebes, the capital of Upper Egypt, was an important religious and cultural center. In Upper Egypt, there are important historical monuments such as the Valley of the Kings, where the tombs of the pharaohs are located, and the Valley of the Queens, where the tombs of the queens are located. These monuments give us important information about the beliefs and customs of ancient Egypt. Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt were two parts of a single civilization, albeit with different geographical features. These two regions complemented each other, revealing the wealth and power of Egypt. Open your eyes and follow the flow of the Nile River to imagine the fertile fields of Lower Egypt and the mysterious temples of Upper Egypt. These two regions will forever continue to tell the fascinating story of ancient Egypt. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River, feeling the warmth of the sun on your skin. As you look around, you see fertile fields, imposing temples and towering pyramids. This magnificent landscape of ancient Egypt was created by a combination of natural resources and a strong economy. The Nile River is Egypt's most important natural resource. It is used to irrigate farmland, provide drinking water, create trade routes, and offer transportation. Without the Nile, the development and prosperity of ancient Egypt would have been impossible. The fertile layer of mud created by the overflow of the Nile River allowed for high productivity in agriculture. This allowed Egypt to become a major producer of crops, such as wheat, barley, cotton, and grapes, and to feed its population. Egypt is also rich in precious metals such as gold, silver, copper, and stone. These minerals contribute significantly to Egypt's economy and are used to build temples, sculpture, and weapons. Stone masonry was highly developed in Egypt. Sculptors skillfully worked the stones to create magnificent works of art that adorned the walls of temples and the tombs of the pharaohs. These works reflect the artistic and cultural richness of Egypt. The Nile River was an important trade route connecting different parts of Egypt. Boats were used to transport wheat, papyrus, stone, and other goods. This trade contributed to Egypt's prosperity and its contacts with other civilizations. Egypt had lively markets where agricultural products, handicrafts, and precious metals were sold. These markets were an important part of the Egyptian economy and allowed people to trade and earn a living. Egypt's natural resources and strong economy were important factors contributing to the development and prosperity of this ancient civilization. The fertility of the Nile River, the productivity of agriculture, and the richness of minerals made Egypt a powerful empire. Open your eyes and imagine the fertile fields, imposing temples and towering pyramids of Egypt, following the flow of the Nile River. This ancient landscape is a miracle created by a combination of natural resources and a powerful economy. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River, in the middle of a landscape bathed in the golden rays of the sun. As you follow the flow of the river, you see fertile fields and towering pyramids. This fascinating world of ancient Egypt witnessed the founding of Medes and united Egypt. Egyptian history begins with the fact that many small kingdoms and city-states once existed on the banks of the Nile River. These kingdoms and city-states were ruled by independent rulers who ruled their own lands and people.
I means I am the first pharaoh of Egypt. I united the different kingdoms and built a powerful empire.
Pharaoh Medes was an important leader who united Egypt and founded the first dynasty. His reign was an important step towards the political and cultural unification of Egypt. Medes also used his military power to unite Egypt. He built a powerful empire by defeating other kingdoms and uniting them under one banner. Medes founded Memphis, the capital of Egypt. This city became the political and cultural center of the empire. Medes also built temples, pyramids, and other monuments to show the power and glory of Egypt. Medes' reign was a turning point in Egyptian history. The empire he united survived for centuries and became one of the most powerful civilizations of the ancient world. Open your eyes and follow the flow of the Nile River to imagine Medes' capital Memphis and the temples and pyramids he built. This ancient landscape will forever tell the story of Medes, the first pharaoh of Egypt, and the founding of a united Egypt. Close your eyes and imagine yourself inside a magnificent temple of ancient Egypt. The imposing pillars and hieroglyphs decorating the walls reflect the power and glory of the pharaohs. In this sacred space, Are you ready to reflect on the absolute power of the pharaohs, Egypt's most important leader? The pharaohs were both the religious and political leaders of Egypt. They were considered the son of the god Ra, and had the responsibility to bring prosperity and justice to the people.
I, Pharaoh, am the son of Ra, the god of Egypt. I will do everything for the welfare and happiness of my people.
The power of the pharaohs was unlimited. They could make laws, start wars, and set taxes. They also made important decisions such as building temples and religious ceremonies. Many monuments and statues were built to show the power and splendor of the pharaohs. These monuments symbolize the pharaohs' close relationship with the gods and their absolute rule over the people. The pharaohs wanted to guarantee their immortality by building huge monuments such as the pyramids. These monuments are a sign of the power of the pharaohs and the permanence of Egyptian civilization. Pharaohs were at the center of the religious beliefs of the people. They were believed by priests to represent the god Ra in sacred ceremonies. The absolute power of the pharaohs contributed to the long-term stability and prosperity of Egypt. However, some pharaohs also abused their power and oppressed the people. The pharaohs occupy an important place in Egyptian history. Their leadership and vision helped this ancient civilization to flourish and leave a lasting mark on the world. Open your eyes and imagine the temples, pyramids, and imposing pharaohs of ancient Egypt. These ruins will forever remind you of the splendor of Egypt's past and the absolute power of the pharaohs. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the sandy terrain of the Giza Plateau. The sun's light illuminates the golden stones of the gigantic pyramids. These mysterious structures are one of the most impressive engineering achievements of ancient Egypt. But how were these pyramids built? The construction of the pyramids took years of labor and coordination by thousands of workers. These workers used simple tools and incredible manpower to move and cut the stones. The construction of the pyramids began by building a ramp. This ramp was used to carry the stones to the top of the pyramids. Once the ramp was completed, the stones were pulled up with the help of sledges and ropes. The stones were placed with millimeter precision. Egyptian craftsmen developed special techniques to fit the stones perfectly together. We still don't know exactly about these techniques, but the perfection of the pyramids is a testament to the skill and knowledge of the Egyptian masters. Building the pyramids was hard and exhausting work. The workers worked long hours in the sun and carried heavy stones. Songs, chants, and stories were used to motivate this hard work. The construction of the pyramids is an indication of the power and prosperity of ancient Egypt. These gigantic monuments represent the engineering skills of Egyptian craftsmen and the absolute power of the pharaohs. Even today, the pyramids continue to fascinate people with their mystery and splendor. Open your eyes and imagine the landscape of the Giza Plateau. The mysterious beauty of the pyramids and the Sphinx continues to reflect the splendor of ancient Egypt and its belief in eternity. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River, in the middle of a landscape where the sunlight illuminates the golden sands. But this time, the splendor of the Old Kingdom has given way to chaos and uncertainty. Welcome to the First Intermediate Period, a time when you will witness the collapse of the centralized autocracy. With the death of the last pharaohs of the Old Kingdom, Egypt entered a period of political instability. Local leaders emerged in different regions and began to establish their own kingdoms. This plunged the country into chaos due to the lack of a centralized authority. There were wars between these kingdoms for land and resources. These wars further weakened Egypt and negatively affected the welfare of the people. There were also economic difficulties. Agricultural production declined, trade routes were cut off, and there was famine. This led to discontent and riots among the people. Religious beliefs were also affected during this period. Different gods were worshipped in different regions, and there was no centralized religious authority. The First Intermediate Period is considered a dark period in Egyptian history. The collapse of the centralized autocracy led to chaos, wars, economic hardship, and a split in religious beliefs. But after this period, Egypt managed to regroup and establish the glory of the Middle Kingdom. Open your eyes and follow the flow of the Nile River to imagine the turbulent landscape of the First Intermediate Period. This period is a turning point in Egyptian history and reminds us of the importance of a strong central authority and how important stability is for prosperity. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River, in the middle of a landscape where sunlight illuminates the sands. But this time, unity and order have given way to division and conflict. Welcome to the era of the rise of regional governments and civil wars. At the end of the first interim period, Egypt managed to regroup. But this unity did not last long. Regional leaders soon emerged and began to establish their own kingdoms. This plunged Egypt once again into a period of political instability. There were wars between these kingdoms for land and resources. These wars further weakened Egypt and negatively affected the welfare of the people. There were also economic difficulties. Agricultural production declined, trade routes were cut off, and there was famine. This led to discontent and riots among the people. Religious beliefs were also affected during this period. Different gods were worshipped in different regions, and there was no centralized religious authority. The rise of regional governments and civil wars period is a complex and challenging period in Egyptian history. Political instability, wars, economic hardship, and religious divisions deeply affected Egypt during this period. Open your eyes and follow the flow of the Nile River to imagine the turbulent landscape of the rise of regional governments and civil wars period. This period is a turning point in Egypt's history and reminds us of the importance of peace and stability. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River, in the middle of a landscape where the sunlight illuminates the sands. But this time, division and chaos have given way to unity and order. Welcome to the era of the restoration of central government. After a period of civil wars and the rise of regional governments, Egypt was able to reunite. The city of Thebes played an important role in this reunification. The kings of Thebes conquered other parts of Egypt and succeeded in establishing a centralized government. The new pharaohs started to rule the country by establishing a strong army and a centralized bureaucracy. They also worked to increase agricultural production, reopen trade routes, and invest in infrastructure projects. Thanks to these efforts, the Egyptian economy revived. Agricultural production increased, trade flourished, and the welfare of the people improved. There were also important religious developments. Instead of worshiping different gods, they began to worship a single god, Ra. This led to religious unity in Egypt. Pharaohs also made significant investments in the construction of temples and the organization of religious ceremonies. Thanks to these investments, Egyptian culture and art enjoyed a golden age. Open your eyes and follow the flow of the Nile River to imagine the peaceful and prosperous landscape of the restoration of central government. This period is a turning point in Egypt's history and shows us that strong leadership and centralized governance can bring prosperity and stability to the country. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River, in the middle of a landscape where the sunlight paints the sands golden. But this time, division and chaos have given way to unity and order. Welcome to the Middle Kingdom, a golden age of artistic and intellectual awakening in Egyptian history. Once silent temple walls and tombs became art galleries during the Middle Kingdom. Sculptors created fascinating works depicting pharaohs and gods in lifelike and idealized forms. Reliefs and paintings overflowed with vivid depictions of everyday life. The colors became brighter, more vibrant, as if reflecting the exuberance of the Nile River. Pharaohs and nobles placed statuettes in temples and tombs to immortalize themselves. These statuettes were not only beautiful, but also whispered stories. Describing the pharaoh's battles, hunts, and devotion to the gods, they reflected the spirit of the Middle Kingdom. The temple walls and tombs were not just cold structures made of stone. They were also living works of art, revealing the richness and splendor of Egyptian civilization. Reliefs and paintings depicted the victories of the pharaohs, offerings to the gods and the daily life of the people. The colors were so vivid that it was as if these scenes had happened yesterday. The Middle Kingdom period witnessed an awakening not only in the visual arts but also in literature. The adventures of the storyteller Sinuhe whispered the mysteries of love and betrayal. The Ipuwer papyrus offered a bleak depiction of a period of famine and chaos. These artifacts reflected the feelings, thoughts, and anxieties of the people of the Middle Kingdom. Listen to the calm flow of the Nile and imagine the splendor of the Middle Kingdom. This was the golden age of Egyptian art and literature. Through sculptures, reliefs, paintings, and writings, the richness and splendor of Egyptian civilization was announced to the world. The Middle Kingdom period shows us how an artistic and intellectual awakening can transform a nation. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River, in the middle of a landscape where the sunlight illuminates the sands. But this time, the atmosphere of peace and prosperity has given way to power and splendor. Welcome to the era of the Middle Kingdom's military and foreign policy. With the restoration of centralized rule, Egypt began to build a powerful army. This army was used to protect Egypt's borders and increase its influence in neighboring regions.
I, Pharaoh, am the son of Ra, the god of Egypt. I will be strong before my enemies and just before my friends.
The pharaohs expanded Egypt's territory through expeditions to neighboring regions such as Nubia and the Sinai Peninsula. Through these expeditions, Egypt controlled important trade routes and gained access to important resources such as gold, ivory, and precious stones. Egypt valued not only military power, but also diplomacy. The pharaohs signed peace treaties and trade agreements with neighboring kingdoms. This made Egypt an important political and commercial power in the region. Egypt's military and diplomatic successes were a source of pride not only for the pharaohs and the army, but also for the people. Egyptian culture and art also enjoyed a golden age during this period. Open your eyes and follow the flow of the Nile River to imagine the majestic landscape of the Middle Kingdom's military and foreign policy era. This period is a turning point in Egyptian history and shows us how a strong army, a shrewd foreign policy, and national unity can make a country strong. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River, in the middle of a landscape where the sunlight illuminates the sands. But this time, the landscape is glittering and majestic. Egypt's golden age after the expulsion of the Hyksos from Egypt. The country experienced a golden age known as the New Kingdom. During this period, Egypt became a major regional power thanks to a strong army and a shrewd foreign policy.
I, Pharaoh, am the son of Ra, the god of Egypt, and I will do everything for the welfare and happiness of my people.
The pharaohs expanded Egypt's borders through expeditions to neighboring regions such as Nubia, the Sinai Peninsula, and Syria. Through these expeditions, Egypt controlled important trade routes and gained access to important resources such as gold, ivory, precious stones, and spices. Egypt's expansion also led to a significant increase in agricultural production. Crops such as wheat, barley, cotton, and grapes were grown on the fertile soil of the Nile River. This greatly increased the prosperity and standard of living of the Egyptian people. The Golden Age of Egypt was an important period not only politically and economically, but also culturally and artistically. During this period, magnificent structures such as temples, pyramids, and monuments were built. They also produced important works of sculpture, painting, literature, and music. Open your eyes and follow the flow of the Nile River to imagine the majestic landscape of Egypt's Golden Age. This period is a turning point in Egyptian history and shows us how strong leadership, a shrewd foreign policy, and a productive agricultural infrastructure can lead a country to prosperity and glory. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River, in the middle of a landscape where the sunlight illuminates the sands. But this time, the landscape is filled with mysterious stories of kings and queens. Are you ready to discover the legendary pharaohs of Egypt's Golden Age? The most important pharaohs of Egypt's Golden Age appear on the stage one by one. Hatshepsut, the strong and brave queen, the first female pharaoh to rule Egypt. She defeated her male rivals to ascend to the throne and brought peace to the country. She showed the beauty of Egypt to the world by building temples and monuments. Thutmose I, son of the god of war, after winning the pharaonic crown, he led the Egyptian army to victory. He expanded the empire by conquering neighboring kingdoms and made Egypt the most powerful country in its history. Amenhotep I, pharaoh of wealth and prosperity, he had a long and peaceful reign. Egypt experienced its golden age during his reign. He built luxurious palaces and temples and showed the splendor of Egypt to the whole world. Akhenaten, revolutionary spirit, he rejected Egypt's traditional religion and promoted the worship of a single god, Aten. This radical decision shook Egypt to its core and is still the subject of much debate. Tutankhamun, the mysterious child pharaoh, he ascended the throne at a young age and had a short reign. His death remains a mystery, but the discovery of his magnificent treasure reminded the world of Egypt's lost glory. Ramses I, the last great pharaoh of Egypt, he lived a long and glorious reign. He won many battles and expanded Egypt's borders. He ensured his immortality by building magnificent monuments, such as the Temple of Abu Simbel. Open your eyes and follow the flow of the Nile River to imagine the traces of the legendary pharaohs of Egypt's Golden Age. These pharaohs left their mark on Egyptian history not only through their political and military achievements, but also through their personalities and visions. Their stories teach us unforgettable lessons about power, triumph, betrayal, and love. Imagine ancient Egypt, where the sunlight sparkles on the Nile River. But this time the atmosphere is different than usual. The air is tense, people are talking in whispers, because something unprecedented in Egyptian history is about to happen. The young pharaoh Akhenaten is about to revolutionize the worship of the gods and transform the country into a nation that believes in a single god. When Akhenaten took the throne, Egypt had a polytheistic religion. Each city had its own gods and temples. But Akhenaten believed that they were all different manifestations of a single god. This god was called Aten, the sun god. To show his faith in Aten, Akhenaten moved his capital from Memphis and founded a new city called Amarna. This city was full of temples and palaces dedicated to Aten. Even the name of the city meant the horizon of Aten. The art of Amarna reflected this new belief. Sculptures and paintings depicted Aten as a solar disk. The pharaoh and queen were depicted as figures embracing the rays of Aten. These works exhibited a simplicity and naturalness never before seen in Egyptian art. Akhenaten's reforms provoked a strong reaction among Egypt's old clergy and nobility. They saw this new faith as a threat and began to advocate a renewed belief in the old gods. Akhenaten's reign was short, and after his death the old religious order was restored. But his monotheistic faith left an unforgettable mark on Egyptian history. Centuries later, this faith would form the basis of the Tawitic religions. Listen to the calm flow of the Nile and feel the echo of Akhenaten's bold reforms. The changes brought about by his monotheistic faith changed Egypt forever. Akhenaten's story shows us the power of beliefs and ideas and how they can transform a nation. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River, in the middle of a landscape where the sunlight illuminates the sands. But this time the landscape reflects a fragmented and divided kingdom. Welcome to Egypt's third intermediate period and the regional kingdoms. Following the end of Egypt's Golden Age, the country entered a period of political instability and fragmentation. Once a glorious empire, Egypt was divided into multiple regional kingdoms. Each kingdom adopted its own pharaoh and form of government, and a power struggle ensued along the banks of the Nile River. In the north, the northern kingdom, ruled by the Libyans, controlled the north of Egypt. The kingdom of Heracleopolis, which had a strong army, was located in the central part of Egypt, and often fought wars with neighboring kingdoms. The kingdom of Thebes, an important cultural and religious center, controlled the south of Egypt. Under these regional kingdoms, Egypt weakened politically and economically. Trade routes and foreign relations declined. Wars between different kingdoms were frequent, and the peaceful waters of the Nile were overshadowed by warships. But even in this dark period, there were glimmers of hope. Some ambitious kings tried to reunite Egypt and bring back the glory of its golden age. Artists and writers created works that depicted the splendor of regional kingdoms and the pain of wars. New religious beliefs and cultural movements emerged, and Egypt's spiritual world was buffeted by the winds of change. Egypt's third intermediate period lasted from 1070 BC to 664 BC and ended with the reunification of Egypt. This turbulent period is considered an important turning point in Egyptian history and shows us how vulnerable a nation, no matter how powerful and glorious, can be to political instability and division. Imagine the complex and turbulent landscape of Egypt's third intermediate period by following the flow of the Nile River. It is a story of disintegration and rebirth. It reminds us that there is always hope, and that even the darkest periods can end. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the banks of the Nile River, in the middle of a landscape where the sunlight illuminates the sands. But this time, the landscape is in the shadow of foreign armies. Are you ready for the Persian and Greek invasions of Egypt? After the end of Egypt's golden age, the country fell into political instability and division. This made the fertile lands of the Nile River and its ancient temples vulnerable. Armies from distant lands began to covet Egypt's riches and independence. The shadow of the Persian Empire in 525 BC, the Persian Empire conquered Egypt. Pharaohs were deposed and the banks of the Nile River were festooned with Persian flags. The Persians ruled Egypt as a province and imposed heavy taxes. This caused great discontent among the Egyptian people. The waters of the Nile River echoed with the cries of rebels. Hopes for independence, the Egyptian people rebelled against the Persians many times. Brave leaders organized resistance movements along the banks of the Nile. But the Persian Empire was too powerful, and the revolts were crushed. Egypt's hopes for independence were buried in the sands of the Nile. In 404 BC, Egypt gained its independence from Persia. But even this independence was short-lived. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. The Greeks influenced Egypt culturally and built many temples and monuments. Greek philosophy and art spread along the banks of the Nile River. Egypt's ancient beliefs and traditions were overshadowed by Greek culture. The tragic story of Cleopatra after the death of Alexander in 30 BC. Egypt was ruled by the Ptolemaic dynasty. In 31 BC, Cleopatra VII, Queen of Egypt, fell in love with the Roman Emperor Julius Caesar. This love changed the fate of Egypt forever. After Cleopatra's death, Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire in 30 BC. The banks of the Nile River came under the control of the Roman legions and Egypt's independence was lost forever. The Persian and Greek invasions are an important turning point in Egyptian history. Egypt's political and economic independence ended, and the fertile lands of the Nile River were exploited by foreign powers. Egyptian culture and traditions were greatly affected, and its ancient beliefs were overshadowed. The effects of these invasions were felt in Egypt for centuries. As the sun sets, open your eyes and follow the flow of the Nile River to imagine the sad landscape of the Persian and Greek occupations of Egypt. This period is the story of Egypt's lost independence and the fragmentation of its cultural identity. It shows us how vulnerable a nation, no matter how powerful and glorious, can be to the threat of outside powers. The waters of the Nile whisper of Egypt's lost glory and its forever changed destiny. Now that we have finished the history of ancient Egypt, we can talk a little bit about its social and cultural structure. While the pharaoh, as the son of the gods, was at the top, society was organized according to a pyramid-like hierarchy. Each individual has a unique role and place in this hierarchy. Pharaoh was the absolute ruler of Egypt and was considered the representative of the gods on earth. Believed to be the son of the god Ra, the pharaoh had unlimited power and authority. Pharaoh's wife and children were also at the top of the hierarchy. Directly below the pharaoh were the priests, who were responsible for worshiping the gods and conducting religious ceremonies. Priests were respected as wise men who could read and interpret sacred texts, and were also interested in medicine. The scribes were an educated class who kept official documents and records using hieroglyphs. The lower layers of the pyramid were occupied by artisans and farmers. The artisans mastered various crafts such as stone carving, weaving, metalworking, and jewelry making. Their products were used for the pharaoh, nobles, and temples. Farmers provided Egypt with food by cultivating the fields and feeding the animals. The lowest layer of the pyramid was occupied by slaves. Prisoners of war or people who could not pay their debts were turned into slaves. Slaves were used for heavy labor in construction, fields, and houses. Over time, there were some changes in the hierarchy. Soldiers and merchants became more important in the New Kingdom. During the Middle Kingdom, regional rulers gained power. Ancient Egyptian society was like a pyramid, organized according to a strict hierarchy. The pharaoh, as the son of the gods, was at the top, while priests, scribes, artisans, farmers, and slaves were at the bottom of the hierarchy. This hierarchy was important for the stability and prosperity of Egyptian society. While the pharaoh, as the son of the gods, was at the top, society was organized according to a pyramid-like hierarchy. In each layer of this hierarchy, there were different professions and lines of work. Let's discover together what kind of working life people had in ancient Egypt. The pharaoh was the absolute ruler of Egypt and had all power and authority. The pharaoh appointed many people to run the country, such as bureaucrats, advisors, and generals. Nobles were people who were close to the pharaoh and lived a rich life. Nobles could own land, trade, or work in the bureaucracy. Priests were the people responsible for worshiping the gods and conducting religious ceremonies. Priests, who could read and interpret sacred texts, were also interested in medicine. Scribes were an educated class who kept official documents and records using hieroglyphs. Scribes worked for the pharaoh and the temples. The artisans mastered various crafts such as stone carving, weaving, metalworking, jewelry making, and shipbuilding. Their products were used for the pharaoh, nobles, and temples. Artisans worked in their workshops or in their homes to produce their products. Farmers provided food for Egypt by cultivating the fields and feeding the animals. Farmers were one of the most important elements of Egyptian society, doing hard work such as pulling the plow, digging irrigation canals, and harvesting the harvest. Merchants sold Egyptian products to other countries and imported products from other countries via the Nile River and the Mediterranean Sea. Sailors used merchant ships to transport these products and maintain trade relations. Prisoners of war or people who could not pay their debts were turned into slaves. Slaves were made to work hard in construction sites, fields, and houses. The living conditions of slaves were very difficult and harsh. In ancient Egypt, people usually worked from sunrise to sunset. There was a short break for lunch. On some holy days and holidays, people did not work. Working life in ancient Egypt was organized according to hierarchy. While the pharaoh and nobles were at the top, different occupational groups such as artisans, farmers, merchants, and slaves formed different layers of society. Each occupational group had its own specific duties and responsibilities. The development and prosperity of ancient Egypt depended on the labor and skills of these different occupational groups. Pharaoh, as the son of the gods, is at the top, while society is organized according to a pyramid-like hierarchy. The place and role of women and children in this hierarchy is also a matter of curiosity. Let's discover together what life was like for women and children in ancient Egypt. Women in ancient Egypt had more freedom and rights compared to other ancient civilizations. They could own property, trade, testify in court, and even have the right to divorce. In addition to taking care of household chores and childcare, women could work as doctors, priestesses, musicians, and dancers. Women were usually married at the age of 12 to 15. Marriage was considered a contract, and the marriage contract was recorded in writing. Women could own property separate from their husbands and were entitled to alimony in the event of divorce. Families were usually large and crowded, and grandparents could also live with the family. Children were highly valued in ancient Egyptian society. They were loved and protected by their parents. Children were usually homeschooled until the age of 7 and learned basic skills such as reading, writing, and arithmetic. After the age of 7, boys went to work in craft workshops or in the fields, while girls were responsible for household chores and helping their mothers. In ancient Egypt, people engaged in various activities in their free time. Playing family games, listening to music, dancing, fishing, and hunting were very popular. Religious holidays and festivals were also an opportunity for people to have fun and socialize. Women and children had more freedom and rights in ancient Egypt than in other ancient civilizations. Women could work in different professions as well as taking care of the household and childcare. Children were loved and protected by their parents. Entertainment and leisure activities were also an important part of ancient Egyptian life. Education, literacy, and the transmission of knowledge are the foundations of ancient Egyptian society. Let's discover together how knowledge was transmitted in this mysterious civilization. The education system in ancient Egypt was organized according to a hierarchical structure. The children of pharaohs and nobles were educated in the palace by private teachers. Priests and scribes were educated in temples, where they learned to read, write, and interpret religious texts. The children of artisans and farmers usually learned their trade from their fathers. The writing system used in ancient Egypt is called hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs are a complex writing system made up of symbols such as birds, animals, and objects. Being able to read and write was an important privilege in ancient Egypt. Only priests, scribes, and nobles could read and write. Knowledge was transmitted in various ways in ancient Egypt. Priests transmitted religious texts and sacred knowledge orally, while scribes preserved knowledge through papyri written in hieroglyphs. Stories, songs, and proverbs were also an important means of passing knowledge from generation to generation. Temples and palaces were important centers of education in ancient Egypt. In these institutions, children were educated in various subjects such as religion, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. There were also public schools in some cities. In these schools, children were educated in subjects such as literacy, basic mathematics, and morality. Libraries also played an important role in the transmission of knowledge in ancient Egypt. Papyri and other written works were kept in libraries in temples and palaces. These works could be read not only by priests and scribes, but also by nobles and educated people. In ancient Egypt, education, literacy, and the transmission of knowledge were very important for the development and prosperity of society. Thanks to different education systems and methods of knowledge transmission, the ancient Egyptian civilization made significant progress in the fields of science, art, and philosophy. Imagine ancient Egypt, where sunlight shimmered on the waters of the Nile River. With the pharaoh at the top as the son of the gods, mysterious medical practices developed to cure diseases and prolong life. Let's discover together how people sought healing in ancient Egypt. Medicine in ancient Egypt was intertwined with religious beliefs and nature. Priests acted as doctors and saw diseases as punishments sent to the gods. Magic and talismans were also used to understand the will of the gods and cure diseases. Doctors in ancient Egypt used their experience and observations to diagnose and treat diseases. Medical texts written on papyrus were also an important source of medical knowledge. These texts included information about the symptoms, causes, and treatments of diseases. Surgical practices were also highly developed in ancient Egypt. Doctors were able to perform various surgical interventions, such as fixing broken bones, removing tumors, and appendectomy. Medicines derived from plants, minerals, and animal products were also used to treat diseases in ancient Egypt. Doctors wrote prescriptions for patients and gave instructions on how to use the medicines. Dentistry was also highly developed in ancient Egypt. Doctors used various methods to relieve toothache, clean teeth, and treat tooth decay. Personal hygiene was also very important in ancient Egypt. People tried to keep themselves clean by washing and changing their clothes every day. They also took regular care of their nails and hair. Medicine and health practices in ancient Egypt developed in the light of religious beliefs, interaction with nature, and scientific knowledge. The surviving medical texts and archaeological findings from ancient Egypt provide us with important information about this civilization's important advances in the field of medicine. While the pharaoh sits at the top as the son of the gods, the universe is ruled by mysterious gods and goddesses. These gods represent the forces of nature and guide people throughout their lives. Let's step into the fascinating world of the Egyptian pantheon and learn about these divine beings. Ra, the sun god. One of the most important gods of the Egyptian pantheon is Ra. Considered the sun god, Ra is seen as the creator and vital source of the universe. It is believed that he travels in a boat in the sky every day and brings light and heat to the world. Osiris, god of the underworld. Osiris is considered the god of fertility and agriculture. After death, Osiris becomes the king of the underworld and is in charge of judging the souls of the dead and offering them a life in the afterlife. Isis, goddess of magic and protection. Isis is the wife of Osiris and mother of Horus. She is considered the goddess of magic, healing, and protection. Isis used her magical powers to resurrect Osiris after his death and fought hard to protect her son Horus. Horus, god of the sky. Horus is depicted as a hawk-headed god and is considered the god of the sky, war, and kingship. The son of Osiris, Horus fought Seth to avenge his father's death and became king of Egypt. Anubis, god of the dead. Anubis is depicted as a jackal-headed god and is considered the god of the dead. He is the god who oversees the mummification process and guides the souls of the dead to the underworld. There are many other important gods and goddesses in the Egyptian pantheon besides Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Anubis. Some of these are as follows: Seth, god of chaos, storm, and desert. Bastet, cat-headed goddess, goddess of home and family. Hathor, goddess of love, beauty, and music. Thoth, god of wisdom, writing, and magic. Mot, goddess of truth and justice. The Egyptian pantheon formed the basis of ancient Egyptian religion and culture. Gods and goddesses represented the forces of nature, guiding people throughout their lives and playing an important role in sacred ceremonies and rituals. The mysterious world of the Egyptian pantheon continues to intrigue today. Let's explore some of the most intriguing mythological stories of ancient Egypt. The story of Osiris. Osiris is the god of fertility and agriculture. He lives happily with his wife Isis and his son Horus. However, Osiris' brother Seth coveted power and the throne. Seth tricks Osiris and kills him. Isis finds Osiris' body in pieces and manages to resurrect him with her magical powers. Osiris becomes king of the underworld and begins to raise Horus as king of Egypt. The story of Horus is depicted as a falcon-headed god and is considered the god of the sky, war, and kingship. Horus, the son of Osiris, fights Seth to avenge the death of his father. In this difficult struggle, Horus manages to defeat Set with the help of the gods and goddesses and becomes the king of Egypt. Horus leads Egypt to prosperity as a just and wise king. Ra's sun boat journey. Every day Ra, the sun god, travels across the sky in a boat, bringing light and heat to the world. The crew on this boat is tasked with helping Ra on his journey and protecting him from evil. However, every day there is a snake that attacks Ra's boat and tries to drag him into darkness. Ra and his crew must fight this snake every day and make the sun rise. Isis and her magical wings. Isis is considered the goddess of magic, healing, and protection. She used her magical powers to resurrect Osiris after his death. In one story, Isis flies into the sky wearing magical wings to save her son's life. Thanks to these wings, Isis managed to escape from Seth and protect Horus. Anubis and the spirits of the dead. Anubis is depicted as a jackal-headed god and is considered the god of the dead. He is in charge of weighing the souls of the dead and taking them to the underworld. Anubis is known as a just god and ensures that each soul receives the treatment it deserves. Ancient Egyptian mythology is a rich and complex world that contains much more than these stories. Each god and goddess has its own unique stories, myths, and symbols. The pharaoh sits at the top as the son of the gods, while majestic temples and mysterious pyramids rising from stone challenge the sky. The art and architecture of this ancient civilization reflects not only beauty and aesthetics, but also beliefs, values, and worldviews. The mystery of the pyramids towering on the Giza Plateau. The massive pyramids are among the most iconic structures of ancient Egypt. Built to help the souls of the pharaohs ascend to the sky, these monuments still fascinate people today. The construction of the pyramids took incredible engineering skill and the labor of thousands of workers. Every stone was placed perfectly, and these mysterious structures have stood the test of time. The splendor of the temples such as Karnak and Luxor formed the center of the religious life of ancient Egypt. These sacred spaces were used to worship the gods and perform religious ceremonies. The walls of the temples were decorated with hieroglyphs and paintings depicting the gods. Columns and statues gave the temples a majestic air. Each temple represents the respect for the gods and the strength of religious beliefs. Stories told by the statues. Ancient Egyptian statues depicted pharaohs, gods and goddesses, and ordinary people. These statues are notable not only for their lifelike depictions but also for their symbolic meanings. Pharaoh statues represent power and authority, while god statues reflect religious beliefs. Statues of ordinary people depict daily life and different statuses in society. The colorful world of paintings. The paintings that adorn the walls of tombs and temples reveal a colorful and vibrant world of ancient Egypt. They depict religious ceremonies, historical events, mythological stories, and scenes of daily life. The colors and symbols used in the paintings provide important information about the beliefs and worldview of ancient Egypt. The art and architecture of ancient Egypt are not just structures built of stone and earth. They are a timeless heritage that reflects the spirit, beliefs, and values of a civilization. For this ancient civilization, time is not only a fleeting concept, but also a sacred cycle. The movements of the sun, moon, and stars are the key to regulating religious beliefs, agricultural activities, and daily life. Living to the rhythm of the Nile. Every year the Nile River overflows, bringing fertility and life. This flood formed the basis of the calendar of ancient Egypt. By observing the rise of the star Sirius, the Egyptians were able to predict the time of the Nile's flood. This allowed them to plan agricultural activities such as planting, harvesting, and irrigation. The mystery of the sacred calendar, the ancient Egyptian calendar, is divided into a solar year of 365 days and 12 months. Each month consisted of 30 days and 5 additional days. The year ended with a festival celebrated by the flooding of the Great Nile River. This calendar system was used not only to keep track of time, but also to determine the dates of religious ceremonies. The pursuit of celestial signs, people in ancient Egypt carefully observed the sky. By following the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, they tried to unravel the mysteries of the universe. Priests and astronomers tried to predict the future by studying sacred texts and observing the sky. The secret astronomy of the pyramids, one of the most mysterious structures of ancient Egypt. The pyramids were used not only as the tombs of the pharaohs, but also for astronomical observations. The directions and angles of the pyramids were adjusted according to the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. In this way, the pyramids were used to determine the times of religious ceremonies and to solve the mysteries of the universe. Adapting to the flow of time in ancient Egypt, the calendar and astronomy played an important role, not only to keep track of time, but also to live in harmony with nature. By following the celestial signs, Egyptians planned their agricultural activities, performed their religious ceremonies, and organized their daily lives. In conclusion, in ancient Egypt, calendar and astronomy were not only a scientific discipline, but also part of a religious and philosophical belief system. By studying the sky, this ancient civilization sought to unravel the mysteries of the universe and adapt to the passage of time. For this ancient civilization, numbers and shapes were not only abstract concepts, but also powerful tools for understanding the universe and building impressive structures. Let's explore the fascinating world of mathematics and geometry in ancient Egypt. The hidden math of the pyramids of Giza, are one of the most iconic structures of ancient Egypt. These colossal structures stand out not only for their size, but also for their mathematical precision. The bases of the pyramids are square and their sides are at right angles to each other. Moreover, the ratio between the height of the pyramids and the sides of the base is very close to the number pi. This mathematical precision shows how advanced the mathematical knowledge of ancient Egypt was. In ancient Egypt, geometry was used not only to build monumental structures such as pyramids, but also in everyday life. Egyptians used geometric knowledge to measure land, plan fields, build irrigation canals, and design furniture. In ancient Egypt, numbers played an important role not only in mathematical operations, but also in religious beliefs and symbolism. Egyptians represented gods and goddesses with numbers and used mathematical codes in their sacred texts. Mathematical discoveries. Mathematicians in ancient Egypt developed basic mathematical operations such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. They also discovered more complex mathematical concepts such as fractions, ratios, and proportions. Ancient Egypt's knowledge of mathematics and geometry not only contributed to the development of this ancient civilization's engineering and architecture, but also laid the foundation for modern mathematics and science. This mysterious world of numbers and shapes demonstrates ancient Egypt's intelligence, creativity, and desire to understand the universe. With the pharaoh at the top as the son of the gods, the fields are full of golden wheat, and the people enjoy abundance. The key to the success of this ancient civilization was the annual flooding of the Nile River and the irrigation systems developed by human ingenuity. Let's explore the fascinating world of agriculture and irrigation in ancient Egypt. Every year, the rains that fall in Ethiopia during the summer months cause the Nile River to overflow. These floods cover the Egyptian soil with a fertile layer of mud and prepare the fields for planting. The Egyptians revered these annual floods of the Nile River as the god of fertility. Because the floods of the Nile could not reach everywhere, the Egyptians used human ingenuity to build irrigation canals. These canals carried the water of the Nile River to the fields, enabling year-round agriculture. Irrigation canals were built from simple materials such as wood and earth. But this simple system dramatically increased agricultural production in ancient Egypt. When the Nile River's water level dropped during the dry season, Egyptians built cisterns to use the water they had collected in advance. These cisterns stored rainwater and water from the Nile River, enabling agriculture during droughts. Cisterns were usually built underground and made of stone or brick. Ancient Egypt grew many different crops such as wheat, barley, lentils, beans, flax, and vegetables. Egyptians used these agricultural products to produce products such as bread, beer, wine, and textiles. Farmers in ancient Egypt used animals, such as oxen and horses, to plow fields, sow seeds, and harvest crops. They also used irrigation canals and cisterns for irrigation. Egyptians also developed natural methods such as fertilizers and pesticides to increase agricultural production. The agricultural and irrigation systems of ancient Egypt are one of the best examples of human ingenuity and living in harmony with nature. By combining the fertility of the Nile River and human labor, the Egyptians were able to meet not only their own needs, but also the food needs of other peoples of the Mediterranean region. Let's talk about mysterious events and curses. As the sun cast a golden light on the waters of the Nile River, a treasure lay hidden in the sands of the Nile Valley. It was the tomb of Tutankhamun, one of Egypt's most famous pharaohs. But did the discovery of this tomb bring with it a terrible curse? Tutankhamun was the youngest pharaoh of Egypt's 18th dynasty. He ascended the throne in 1332 BC and ruled for only 9 years. The cause of his death is still unknown, but various theories have been put forward, such as malaria or a car accident. Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter. This discovery is considered one of the most important findings in Egyptian archaeology. The tomb consisted of 3 chambers filled with gold, jewelry, and precious artifacts. These artifacts provide us with invaluable information about the New Kingdom period of Egypt. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb also gave rise to a legend known as the Curse of Tutankhamun. According to this legend, anyone who opened the tomb or touched the cursed objects would contract a fatal disease. Lord Carnarvon, Tutankhamun as arinen finansmanini saglayan v kesvinde ellen biering gilles aristocratidi. Measuring kesvidilmasinden burkak hafta sonra, Carnarvon siversineki sirigi sanuku septisemai yakalandi v oldu. Bu ole, lanate inananlar isen bir kanit olarak goroldu. Carnarvon unununun dogal, nidenlerden kaynaklandigini v lanetel hikbir, ilgisi olmadigini sabunen burkup bilim insani v arkeolog dabar. Lane der kanitlarin yittersais oldugunu v psychologic etkenlarin de rol oineabilisigini savunurlar. While the pharaohs chase immortality with their majestic temples and mysterious pyramids, the adventures of a French general open a new chapter. Yes, we are talking about Napoleon Bonaparte. During the Egyptian campaign of 1798, Napoleon and his army arrive in Giza. Fascinated by the Great Pyramid of Giza, one of the most iconic structures in the world, Napoleon makes a bold decision: he will spend a night deep inside the pyramid. This decision surprises both the soldiers and the locals. Napoleon, along with a few elite men, steps into the dark recesses of the pyramid. Under the flickering light of torches, they discover mysterious rooms filled with mummified bodies and hieroglyphs. Strange sounds and an eerie atmosphere prevail inside this ancient structure. In this mysterious setting, Napoleon spends hours contemplating Egypt's past and future. According to some sources, Napoleon had a dream during this night. In his dream, an Egyptian priest prophesied his future and told him that he would lead a great empire. This dream motivated Napoleon and strengthened his determination to conquer Egypt. There is no conclusive evidence that Napoleon spent a night inside the pyramid. It is confirmed by some historians and considered a legend by others. Regardless, this story shows Napoleon's interest in the mysterious Egypt and his desire to unravel the mysteries of this ancient civilization. It shows us that Napoleon was not only a soldier and leader, but also an explorer and adventurer. This experience in the darkness of the pyramid influenced Napoleon's view of Egypt, and perhaps his entire life. Imagine ancient Egypt, where the sunlight sparkles on the waters of the Nile River. We stepped into the mysterious world of this ancient civilization and experienced an unforgettable journey. We discovered the glory of the pharaohs, the splendor of the temples, the wisdom of the hieroglyphs, and the mystery of the pyramids. What ancient Egypt teaches us allows us not only to understand the past, but also to shape the future. The wisdom of this ancient civilization continues to inspire and amaze us. The mysteries of ancient Egypt are still waiting to be solved, and the story of this mysterious civilization is still unfolding. See you in the next videos where we will shed light on many different civilizations,